For decades, George Clooney was the king of Hollywood, the charming doctor from the mastermind of the Ocean's 11 crew, the man who could light up any room with a single smile. But behind the glamour, fame, and fortune was a story the world never truly saw. At 64, Clooney's life has taken a turn so tragic, so heartbreaking, that even his closest friends struggle to talk about it. From near-death accidents to lingering pain, from personal losses to walking away from Hollywood, this is the untold story of George Clooney's greatest struggle, and the truth might just change the way you see him forever. George Clooney's story could easily have been written as a Hollywood script itself, a tale of persistence, timing, and undeniable charisma. Born on May 6, 1961, in Lexington, Kentucky, Clooney was the son of television host Nick Clooney and beauty queen Nina Bruce, while the entertainment industry was always within reach. George's path to stardom was far from straightforward. He spent his early 20s chasing small acting jobs, appearing in minor roles in television shows, like The Facts of Life and Roseanne. But behind the charming smile was a young man struggling to break free from the anonymity that plagued so many aspiring actors in Los Angeles. Then came 1994. Clooney landed the role that would forever change his life, Dr. Doug Ross on NBC's, with his devilish grin, easy confidence, and natural warmth. Clooney quickly became the breakout star of the medical drama. Viewers didn't just watch for the gripping medical emergencies, they tuned in for Clooney's magnetic presence. His time on brought him more than fame. It brought him opportunities. Hollywood saw in Clooney not just a television actor, but a leading man in the making. He transitioned into films with From Dusk Till Dawn, One Fine Day, and Out of Sight, proving that his charisma wasn't confined to the small screen. Clooney's career trajectory was no longer a slow climb. It was a rocket launch. Clooney's career in the late 90s and early 2000s was a masterclass in reinvention. Where some actors are pigeonholed, he embraced variety. From the heist charm of Danny Ocean in Ocean's 11 to the gritty realism of Syriana, a performance that earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, Clooney resumed that blended commercial success with critical acclaim. His decision-making was strategic. He worked with directors like Steven Soderbergh and the Coen brothers, ensuring he stayed creatively challenged while delivering crowd-pleasing performances. Films like Michael Clayton, The Descendants, and Up in the Air showcased his ability to inhabit roles that were both emotionally complex and universally relatable. By the mid-2000s, Clooney had evolved beyond acting. He became a respected director and producer, taking risks with political dramas like Goodnight and Good Luck, which earned 6 Oscar nominations. His involvement in humanitarian projects and political activism only deepened his public image as more than just another Hollywood star. To audiences, Clooney wasn't merely an actor, he was the embodiment of old-school movie star glamour, combined with modern-day substance. But behind the suave exterior, cracks were beginning to form. One of Clooney's greatest talents was his ability to maintain a carefully curated image. Interviews showed a quick-witted, self-deprecating man who seemed untouched by the darker realities of fame. He played the part of Hollywood's most eligible bachelor for years, brushing off marriage rumors and romantic scandals with a grin and a joke. But those close to him knew that George was more complex than the media caricature. He had an intense work ethic, often pushing himself to exhaustion. His humanitarian trips, from visiting refugee camps in Sudan to advocating for political reform, exposed him to the world's suffering in ways that left lasting emotional scars. Friends often said Clooney was always on, always conscious of how the world perceived him. That level of self-awareness, while beneficial for a public figure, took a toll. It was harder to relax, harder to trust, and harder to fully live without the feeling that someone was always watching. As the 2010s approached, Clooney was still at the height of his powers, but life had a way of forcing even the brightest stars into unexpected turns. And for George, the turning point would come suddenly and violently. On a winding road in Italy, on July 10, 2018, George Clooney's life was violently jolted off its comfortable path. While filming the television miniseries Catch-22 in Sardinia, Italy, Clooney set out for a routine morning ride on his motorcycle, something he'd done countless times before. The winding roads of the Italian coast were familiar, and riding gave him a sense of freedom he couldn't find on a movie set. But that morning, freedom turned into near tragedy. A car suddenly pulled in front of him without warning. Traveling at around 60 miles per hour, Clooney had no time to react. He slammed headfirst into the vehicle's windshield before being thrown several feet into the air and landing hard on the pavement. Witnesses described the impact as sickening, like watching a rag doll hurled through the air. He was rushed to a local hospital, where doctors were astonished he was even alive. His helmet had likely saved his life, but the crash left him with severe bruising, deep cuts, and internal injuries. Clooney later said that in those moments before impact, he thought about his wife Amal and their then 1-year-old twins, wondering if he'd ever see them again. Although he recovered enough to continue filming, the incident shook him deeply. For the first time in his career, George began questioning his own physical limits. It wasn't just about acting anymore. It was about survival. The motorcycle crash didn't just leave emotional scars. It left physical ones that would follow Clooney for years. While much of the media attention at the time focused on his miraculous survival, the aftermath was far less glamorous. He developed chronic back pain, nerve issues, and headaches that made even the simplest daily activities exhausting. For a man known for his effortless charm and relaxed demeanor, the struggle to hide constant discomfort was taxing. Clooney had already battled severe pain earlier in his career after a 2005 onset injury while filming Syriana, where he tore the dura, the membrane surrounding the spinal cord. That injury caused debilitating migraines and required multiple surgeries. The 2018 accident only compounded these old wounds. Close friends noted that Clooney began moving more slowly, often shifting in his seat during interviews to ease the pain. While he never publicly complained, his reduced appearances at red carpet events and Hollywood functions hinted at the truth. His body was no longer the same. Pain, he once said in a rare candid moment, changes the way you look at everything. It forces you to prioritize differently, to weigh the cost of every trip, every project, every commitment. For Clooney, who had built a career on constant motion, this new reality forced him to slow down in ways he had never anticipated. By the early 2020s, George Clooney was no longer the ever-present Hollywood fixture he once was. While some chalked it up to selective career choices or his growing focus on directing, the truth was more complicated. The physical pain, combined with the emotional weight of the crash, pushed him to reassess what mattered most. Fatherhood became a driving force. Clooney didn't want his twins to grow up with their dad always on a film set halfway across the world. The accident had reminded him how quickly life could change and how precious every moment with family was. Amel's work as a human rights lawyer also played a role. Her cases often took her to dangerous, politically volatile regions, and Clooney preferred to stay close in case she needed him. Hollywood, meanwhile, had shifted. The pandemic disrupted film schedules, and streaming platforms altered the industry's landscape. Clooney took on fewer acting projects, focusing instead on producing and directing select films that spoke to him personally, like The Tender Bar. He preferred creative control over chasing box office success. To the public, his absence felt like a slow fade. For Clooney himself, it was a conscious decision, a way to protect his health, cherish his family, and avoid the relentless grind that had defined his life for decades. But stepping away didn't erase the ache, either in his body or in the hearts of fans who missed seeing him light up the screen. And as the years went on, whispers about his health began to grow louder. When George Clooney became a father at 56, it was both the happiest and most overwhelming chapter of his life. The arrival of his twins, Alexander and Ella, in 2017 brought a sense of purpose he had never experienced, a shift from a life of personal freedom to one filled with sleepless nights, bottles, and baby cries. Clooney had once sworn off the idea of marriage and children, famously telling interviewers he wasn't the settling down type. But meeting Amal Alamuddin, the internationally renowned human rights lawyer, changed that. She brought stability, intellect, and compassion into his world, and fatherhood was a natural next step. Yet balancing the demands of Hollywood with the responsibilities of parenting was no small feat. Clooney's work often took him to distant film sets, while Amal's legal career meant frequent travel to high-conflict regions. They were a power couple under constant public scrutiny, trying to give their children a private and grounded upbringing. George made a conscious decision to scale back his work after the twins were born. He turned down big studio roles, choosing, instead, to spend mornings making pancakes and afternoons reading bedtime stories. For a man who had once lived for the energy of film, sets, and red carpets, this was a drastic but welcome change. Still, the struggle was real. Clooney often spoke about how fatherhood made him more protective and, at times, anxious. The motorcycle accident in 2018 only intensified those feelings, a constant reminder that his family depended on him, and he couldn't take reckless risks anymore. The forever bachelor was now a devoted father, but that devotion sometimes meant sacrificing parts of himself. Clooney's career spanned decades, and with such a long journey came the inevitable, losing friends and colleagues along the way. The pain of losing close companions was something George rarely spoke about in public, but those who knew him say it weighed heavily on him. In 2014, he mourned the loss of Mike Nichols, the acclaimed director who had been both a mentor and a friend. Years earlier, he had grieved the deaths of actors and crew members he'd worked with, each loss a reminder of life's fragility. More recently, as he entered his 60s, the number of farewells seemed to grow. Losing friends from the industry was especially hard for Clooney, because these were people who understood the pressures of fame, the isolation, the constant attention, the difficulty of maintaining normal relationships. They had shared private jokes on set, late-night conversations in hotel bars, and moments of vulnerability away from the cameras. The hardest part, friends say, wasn't just the absence of those individuals but the memories they carried. Each loss was like losing a piece of his own history. Clooney became more reflective, often talking about the importance of cherishing time and telling people you love them before it's too late. These experiences deepened his humanitarian efforts, but they also took an emotional toll. The charming, unshakable star the world saw on screen was, in reality, a man who had learned the hard way that even the brightest lives are touched by darkness. George Clooney's activism has long been one of his defining qualities. From co-founding the Not on Our Watch project to his relentless work spotlighting the Darfur crisis, Clooney never limited himself to Hollywood concerns. He was on the ground in Sudan, meeting with victims of war crimes, documenting atrocities, and pressing world leaders to act. But advocacy comes with a cost. Witnessing the horrors of genocide, poverty, and political corruption left deep emotional marks. Clooney has spoken about how hard it is to leave those places and return to a world of movie premieres and press junkets. The contrast can be jarring, even guilt-inducing. In private, friends say Clooney often wrestled with feelings of helplessness. Despite his fame and influence, he couldn't fix everything. He could raise awareness, fund humanitarian projects, and lobby governments, but the crises persisted. The work also put him in danger. In 2008, he contracted malaria during a trip to Sudan. In 2012, he was arrested outside the Sudanese embassy in Washington, D.C., while protesting the treatment of civilians. Each mission reminded him that celebrity status didn't shield him from harm. As the years went on, Clooney began choosing his humanitarian missions more selectively, not because he cared any less, but because the emotional weight was becoming harder to bear. It's one thing to play a hero on screen. It's another to witness real-world tragedies and feel powerless to change them. By his early 60s, George had experienced enough personal and global pain to reshape how he saw the world. And now, at 64, those years of loss, advocacy, and physical hardship have all converged into the heartbreaking reality he faces today. By the time George Clooney turned 64, whispers about his health began circulating more frequently in Hollywood circles and tabloid headlines. Some claimed he was battling lingering complications from his motorcycle crash. Others suggested more serious, undisclosed illnesses. While Clooney himself has never confirmed any grave diagnosis, the visible changes were enough to spark speculation. Fans noticed he appeared thinner in public appearances, and he sometimes moved more cautiously on stage or during interviews. His once effortless stride had slowed, and in candid photos, he was occasionally seen rubbing his lower back or stretching to ease stiffness. Those who worked closely with him admitted he was in constant low-level pain and had to pace himself more than ever before. For Clooney, whose career had been built on physical presence and charisma, the idea of being seen as frail was difficult to accept. In interviews, he deflected concerns with humor, brushing off questions about his health by joking about aging or making light of his injuries. But close friends knew the truth. His body carried years of wear, both from on-set stunts and his real-life accidents. The speculation about his health wasn't just about his body. Some wondered if emotional strain was taking its toll too. Years of humanitarian work, personal loss, and the pressures of being in the public eye had created an invisible weight that no camera could fully capture. And at 64, George was no longer able or willing to hide it as completely as he once did. In his earlier years, Clooney's absence from Hollywood would have been unthinkable. He was the man who could carry a blockbuster, headline an awards season, and charm his way through countless interviews. But by his early 60s, his relationship with the industry had changed dramatically. Part of the reason was simple. Priorities. Clooney valued time with Amel and their twins far more than chasing the next role. Another factor was his desire for control. Directing and producing allowed him to choose projects that aligned with his creative vision, without the grueling schedule of acting in big studio films. Yet there was also a deeper reason for his drift from Hollywood. The industry itself was shifting. Streaming services were dominating. Box office dynamics were changing, and many of the roles that once defined Clooney's career were now being offered to younger actors. Clooney could still headline a film if he wanted to, but the hunger to do so wasn't the same. Friends say he became more reclusive, preferring quiet dinners at his Lake Como villa to Hollywood parties. While he still maintained friendships with longtime collaborators, his days of constantly networking and attending events were largely behind him. Even when he did appear at awards shows, there was a sense that he was dropping in rather than fully participating in the Hollywood machine. For fans, it felt like the slow fade of a legend. For Clooney, it was simply the next chapter, a conscious step back from the spotlight that had defined his adult life. George Clooney's career will always be remembered as one of the most successful in Hollywood history. He won Oscars, headlined billion-dollar franchises, directed critically acclaimed films, and used his fame to advocate for causes that mattered. On paper, it's a legacy that any actor would envy. Yet behind the accolades lies a more complicated truth. Clooney's final years in the public eye have been tinged with a quiet sadness, a combination of physical limitations, personal loss, and the emotional toll of decades in the spotlight. The charming leading man who once seemed untouchable is now a reflective figure, aware of his own mortality. Friends say he talks more about the end of things, not in a morbid way, but with a realism that comes from surviving accidents, losing loved ones, and watching time catch up with even the brightest stars. He's proud of his work, his marriage, and his children. But there's also a sense of unfinished business, projects left unmade, places left unvisited, and perhaps even roles he wishes he had taken. For fans, this adds a bittersweet layer to his story. Clooney will always be the silver-haired icon with the easy grin. But knowing the struggles behind that smile makes his achievements even more remarkable. His legacy is one of resilience as much as it is of glamour, a man who lived fully, loved deeply, and faced life's tragedies with grace. And while the world may see him less often now, those who admire him understand that George Clooney's the story isn't just about fame or fortune. It's about the very human journey of aging, enduring, and finding meaning in the years we're given, no matter how heartbreaking the path may be. George Clooney's journey reminds us that no amount of fame or fortune can shield us from life's trials. But what do you think about his decision to step away from the spotlight? Should he make one final Hollywood comeback, or is his legacy already untouchable? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this story as moving as we did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the stories behind the stars you love.